But when you understand that the spiritual dinah in the world is that when there's a will, there's a way, especially when your will is very, very driven, it's a game changer.
Welcome to Prism of Torah with Reb Prisman, engaging Divrei Torah, packed with stories and practical insights. Find us wherever you get your podcasts or at prismoftorah.org.
Shalom Uvracha. In this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayakhel, there's an innocent-looking pasuk, but it seems to be that there's a very deep idea behind this pasuk. Perek Lamed Hey Pasuk Kaf Aleph. It says, "Vayavohu kol ish asher nesa'o liboy, v'chol asher nadva rucho, oiso heviu es trumas Hashem lemeleches oel moed," etc. Which translates to, every man whose heart inspired him or carried him came, and everyone whose spirit moved him brought the portion to Hashem, and they volunteered for the work that needed to be done for the Mishkan. The question begs itself, what's this repetitiveness? It says, "Chol ish asher nesa'o libo," his heart inspired him or carried him. And then it says, "V'chol asher nadva rucho," his spirit moved him. What does that mean? It sounds like a lot of redundancy over here. So I looked at the Mefarshim, and indeed I saw several answers. One was the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. He said, indeed, there are two types of groups that volunteered to give something for the Mishkan. One was Asher Nadva Rucho. He gave whatever he felt he was able to give. But there was a group that did even more than that. Because they were so eager to give, they didn't cheshbon, they didn't calculate, wait, this I can give, but I can't give more than this amount. They give whatever they felt like giving, even though logically it didn't make sense they would be able to give so much. But they still, because their heart carried them, as it says, "Nesa'oi liboy," it inspired them, it carried them. They said, this is really what I want. I am determined. And hence, they went off and managed a way to give that amount. Ad kan Or HaChaim HaKadosh. And then, with Siyata Dishmaya, I found this unbelievable Ramban. The Ramban says, we're talking about two different groups in totality, meaning one group was just volunteering to give and donate things for the Mishkan. As the word nedava implies, I'm just being volunteering, giving. That's nadva ruchoi. They brought portions, whatever the material that was required. However, nesa'o liboy, it makes a lot of sense that the word to volunteer to give something is not there. Nedava is not in there. It says nesa'o liboy, his heart carried him. Says the Ramban, we're talking about a different group. They're the ones that actually did the impossible. They did the very unique work that there is to be done. The Ramban explains that we're talking about two different groups over here. Ish asher nesa'o liboy, that's talking about the group that actually did the malachas. They did the very unique work that was required to do for the Mishkan. Now you need to be trained to do this type of work. Most of these people did not know the difference between a hammer and a screwdriver. However, the Ramban says that somehow the people found it within their nature to do what they were called upon to do. The Ramban explains that Asher nesa'o libo literally means whose heart lifted him up. They had no training nor the skill, but they had the inspiration and daring and initiative that it took to get the job done. This is the Nakuda the Ramban's bringing out. This group had the initiative, they had the drive, and they wanted so badly to be part of doing the work that is required to build the Mishkan, even though it was very difficult, and no one taught them. But the spiritual DNA in the world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created is that when you really, really want something, your heart pulls you to something, then you'll be able to manage to do it. Especially when it's something to do with Kedusha, learning Torah, doing something for the Mishkan. That's the group Asher nesa'o libo, that their hearts carry them, as opposed to the other group that has the word nedava in there, which means nadva ruchoi, that they volunteered a portion for Hashem. They actually were willing to give over to the Mishkan certain materials. Be it the answer that we just said that the Ramban gives, be it the answer of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, both have a tzad shaveh. They have something similar. That Asher Nesa'o Libo, which already hints to us that it's something, so to speak, above and beyond nature. The heart carried them. They did something that, naturally speaking, you would think it's not really sensible. How can that be? How can they give more than they are able to give? According to the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. And according to the Ramban, what do you mean they want to do the work for the Mishkan? They need a trainer. They need someone to teach them their job. No, the answer is the Ramban and the Or HaChaim HaKadosh both teach us this unbelievable concept, part of the spiritual DNA of the way the world was created. If you really want something and your heart is pulling that way, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help you manage to succeed. As we know, the famous Chazal, B'derech she'adam roitze lalech molechin oto. Then the ways a person wants to go, Hashem will help him get there, be it for good or be it for the bad. We see from here, according to the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, and even more, the Ramban, they are teaching us that the greatest key to success is not necessarily the training, it is the ambition and initiative to do something. The famous Mir Mashgiach Rav Yerucham writes similarly, if one looks at the great people in the world, if one looks at those who have made financial fortunes, most, if not all such people, achieved their greatness thanks to their tremendous drive and initiative. He goes on to say that what the major difference between the Rishonim and us is not necessarily their IQ or intelligence, which is for sure a difference, but the main difference is that they had a tremendous drive and sense of ambition to know all of Torah. That is what separates them from us. I know someone very well from my childhood, and I saw he was very into sports, specifically basketball. When I say he had the natural talent to be a good basketball player, no. But I saw him. I saw it in his eyes. He was so ambitious. It was so important for him to do well in basketball that his drive to do well carried him far and beyond people that were actually very talented and gifted in basketball. I think it's an amazing mashal for everything in life, especially reaching a high level of spirituality, which is what life is all about. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created such a metzius, a spiritual DNA in the world, that when you're ambitious and you drive yourself to something, and you have the initiative, you will be able to reach there. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz speaks about this a lot when it comes to Yaakov Avinu. The famous Paitan said that Yaakov Avinu was unique, that he had Yichud Alev. He had this unique desire of his heart, a very focused desire. And that is what allowed him to do things that seem to be above nature. But when you understand that the spiritual DNA in the world is that when there's a will, there's a way, especially when your will is very, very driven, it's a game changer. That becomes nature, because that is the spiritual DNA, nature, if you will, of the world. And that's why he was able to pick up a stone that was on top of the well, where a lot of people together couldn't do it. But when he saw Rachel, he was able to do such a thing. And there was many other things above nature that happened for him because he was so focused and determined in doing Ratzon Hashem. Ratzon that will be focused with our hearts and will be driven and have the initiative and drive to do Ratzon Hashem. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help us reach Yimil Hashem very high levels, because that is the spiritual DNA of the world. Reb Chaim Kanievsky wasn't known to have such a high IQ. He was known to be driven, to be someone that knew the importance of Torah, and it was very important for him to be Matzliach. Yiratzon that will also have the drive for holy and spiritual things, which is what life is all about. I would like to end off with a true story, a family that is very famous, and I want to share with you the way it all started. One of the Reichman's brothers, his fingers traced over the contractor's estimate. The numbers seemed excessive, $120,000 to build a simple warehouse for their growing tile business. Outside the small office of Olympia Floor and Wall Tile Company, a steady Toronto rain tapped against the windows. He looked at his brother and he said, "It's too much. I believe we can build it ourselves for much less." His brother shook his head. "What do you mean? We sell tiles. We don't build buildings." So the other brother said, "So we'll learn." None of the brothers had construction experience, but they possessed something perhaps more valuable, a firm belief that anything was possible with determination and faith. Where contractors saw complications, the Reichman brothers saw opportunities. For 6 months, they immersed themselves in the project. One of the brothers mastered building codes. The other brother negotiated with suppliers. And the third brother surprised the workers. Quality would never be compromised. And from Friday afternoon, of course, until Motzei Shabbos, all work ceased without exception. When completed, the warehouse cost $70,000, nearly half the lowest contractor's bid. Standing in the completed building, the scent of fresh concrete was in the air. One of the brothers turned to the rest and said, "There's something to this construction business." That simple observation launched an empire. From single-story warehouses, they expanded to office buildings. By 1969, they incorporated Olympia and York developments. In 1975, they completed First Canadian Place, Canada's tallest building. Their reputation for honesty became legendary. Their handshake carried more weight than written contracts. The 1980s saw explosive growth. They acquired 9 Manhattan skyscrapers for $300 million, properties that would soon be valued at $3.5 billion. At their peak, the Reichman family controlled assets worth over $31 billion, making them among the wealthiest families worldwide. Every Friday, as financial markets churned and construction crews around the world awaited instructions, the Reichman brothers' offices fell silent. The Shabbos remained inviolated, a testament to principles more valuable than profit. It began with a simple conviction: I can build it better myself. From that first step, from that first warehouse, an empire rose, all because they had the courage to begin and were determined. This was just highlights about the Reichman family. They were the biggest real estate development company in the history of the world. Many of us are aware of their tremendous generosity of the family, giving out millions and millions of dollars to tzedakah and Torah causes. But this is how they get started. They had a tile business, and one day they were determined. They saw an opportunity. They believed in themselves. And with siyata deshmaya, based on the spiritual DNA that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in our world, they were able to get and achieve to their goals. We should too use the spiritual DNA, idea, and concept that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put in the world to manage and leverage off of the main reason the world was created, for us to mimic as much as we can the Heilige Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Have a good Shabbos.
This concludes another episode of the Prism of Torah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and give a 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or our own website, prismoftorah.com, where we have a full archive of all our past episodes. We would like to thank Yona Vefa for the recording equipment and Eli Podcast Productions for handling all our post-podcast productions. Join us next week for another enlightening conversation on the Prism of Torah.